Yes, sir. It's the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, ranking the rear guards at the top of the fantasy game, top 5 fantasy D-men. We're getting into it on the Wednesday episode. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back inside the Fantasy Hockey Lab, everybody, to the latest edition of your daily source for fantasy hockey news and soon-to-be daily betting breakdowns. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Shout out, salute, and thank you so much to the everydayers for holding us down and making us your first listen every single day, to the point where we are now the 8th ranked podcast in fantasy sports in the country. And honestly, this isn't about coming on here to brag. It's to come on here and show love and support back to everyone out there for putting us into this position. And I hope, Steele, that realistically that means more people than ever will be making a little bit of money this season in the fantasy game.
Yes, sir.
You know that's what we're all about on this show. By the way, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Mr. Roden, you know I had to get that salute in, but for real, we're on here to get down to making money in the fantasy game and soon putting a little money in the pocketbook via nightly bets. So 30-minute shows, Monday through Friday. You know what it is, guys. We try and get you in and out with all the news and info you need. And on today's episode, Steele, it's the top 5 fantasy blue liners, baby. And this has been an awesome list, and these are the cream of the crop. These 5 are the guys you want. And when you look up at the standings in your league this year, there is a very good chance the winning team or the team near the top is going to have probably at least one of these 5 players.
Yeah, if these aren't the first 5 defensemen off the board in your draft, something has gone wrong. And these are the top 5 defensemen in the NHL right now, fantasy-wise. Look, there might be a little bit of disrespect coming our way with the number 5 position, or at least my number 5 defenseman.
Oh, here we go again.
Look, for me, I'm going to get right into it. Again, shout out to everyone who jumps in and tunes into the podcast. Like Flip said, we couldn't have done this without you, so I got to give a shout out myself. But I'll jump right in with the number 5 defenseman I view going in this upcoming season, and it's Quinn Hughes. And it feels a little bit disrespectful to put him as the number 5 guy. But again, I'm a huge peripheral categorical player when it comes to defensemen and players that I try to draft. And Quinn Hughes doesn't cut it in the hits, in the blocks. He's up there in shots now, had 199 shots last season. But it feels disrespectful to put him at 5 when he had a career season, 92 points, 17 goals, 75 assists, a plus 38, which has been a huge jump in his defensive ability as well in the defensive zone with the Vancouver Canucks throughout his entire career. But I mean, this is just a skillful player. He's really cleaned up his game in the defensive zone now. Again, going into his 7th season in the National Hockey League, he's quick. He's witty with the puck. He's creative in his own zone to get it out and find his players for a quick breakout. He's able to join the rush. He's got a quick shot as well when he quarterbacks the power play unit. And I mean, when you play alongside Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, you're going to have one of the top power plays in the league right now. Brock Besser was absolutely firing last year for them too, which we'll probably talk about when we get into our other positional list. But Quinn Hughes, for me, number 5, might get some disrespect on him putting him at 5, but that's where I view him because of the lack of hits, the lack of blocks. And if he can continue to get up in those categories, he's going to continue to go up in this list.
So let's be clear. I don't think either of us mean a single slice of disrespect towards Quinn Hughes,
100%.
Who is also, let's be very clear, the Norris Trophy winner as the quote-unquote best D-man in the NHL. A player that, after a 92-point season, you can't help but feel that like 85 points is almost the floor of what you expect from this guy. That's how good he is. And the Vancouver Canucks, this isn't a slight to that team either, because he's going to be quarterbacking a really good power play with some really good players that you already mentioned. So I think what needs to be clearly said here is This is what we look at, mostly laying weight into the categorical leagues, which is also shout out to our listener leagues coming up. If you're interested, we're going to have a $50 league, a $20 league for the more casuals, more details to come. If you're interested, Instagram, Twitter, we're getting the plugs in. That's where you need to go. Points-based league, Steele, he could be number 2. If you want to make an argument after that, it's Cale Makar at number 1. We're not giving away any sneaky details here, but it could be Quinn Hughes at number 2. However, that's not what we're looking at on this show, and that's not what we do. But I will give him respect as definitely a top 3 D-man on the ice in terms of his impact on the team and in terms of points-based leagues. However, hey, man, Quinn Hughes at 5 for me too, brother. Look, 29 hits, 55 block shots are not going to cut it when you're looking at the other players on this list who are bringing triple digits in those categories. He just doesn't add up mathematically. So that's just it. Quinn Hughes at 5, absolutely sensational player. And in other formats, could clearly see him coming off the board 2, 3, nothing much later than that. Over to you, my friend, though, for number 4, because I think we can both agree these next 4 guys, they bring it a little bit more in the peripherals.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm going to. I think this is just, I mean, they're close in the same age, right? Not if they might be the same age, but at number 4, I think this is just a better version of how I view Maurice Sider, and it's Rasmus Dahlin at number 4 for me. He brings the peripheral categories. He's a banger league beauty. 195 hits, 154 blocks, 235 shots, 66 penalty minutes. He is going to do it all for you, and he is durable. He stays healthy. He puts his body on the line. He gets in front of the puck. He gets physical. He's not afraid to throw his weight around, which we see him all the time, lay the ball out there. He is one of my favorite defensemen to watch in the National Hockey League right now, and you and I have discussed that this is a fantasy goldmine of a team with the Buffalo Sabres. Jack Quinn, Alex Tuck, Tage Thompson, JJ Peterka, who we both view having a stepping out season. I think Rasmus Dahlin gets back to that 70-plus point realm of where we saw him 2 years ago. 20 goals this past season. I think he can get double digits again, which he's done 3 consecutive seasons in a row. He's got a rocket of a shot. This guy is lethal. Lethal when he steps into one. Absolutely love this player. He had 59 points last year, but like I said, back to 70, 75 points is where I view him at. He's an absolute banger league beauty. We're going to talk about some banger league beauties in another episode. He'll be in that one for sure, but I love this player because of everything that he does, filling out all the categories that I love to play in fantasy hockey leagues.
Let me gush on this player a little bit more after the break, after I have him ranked slightly higher, Steele. Got a different of opinion here. And this is just going to be one of those cases that for me this year, the Buffalo Sabres come up, that bounce back you expect from Dahlin in terms of overall output and points, and just how good this young core is in Buffalo. I want a piece of it real bad. And I want a piece of Rasmus Dahlin. So this is one of those players that this year I'm heavily investing in, and I am going to put him higher on this list, and I'll explain why after the break, because I have Roman Yosi in at the 4 spot, and we can talk about him after the break as well, Steele. I just wanted to drop it in here that, look, I get the come up in Nashville as well. Stammer, Marchessault, Brady Shea. This is a team that everyone has their eyes peeled on to see what they can do because expectations are now sky high in the Music City. Roman Yosi, probably one of the most reliable fantasy pieces, forward, goaltender, or D-men of the past 10 seasons. The man is just consistent out there with 250-plus shots with regularity. Triple-digit in block shots. The hit's not a huge part of his game, but there with that value as well. Steele, 45 penalty minutes, and perennially being able to put up 60-plus points. Last year, at 33 years old, 85 points, the second highest ever in his career. I love this player. I love the team, but it's the top 3 guys that I like that much more that I'm hyped to talk about after the break. Hit me with your take at Yosi at 4, though, very quickly.
I'll talk about Roman Yosi when we come back from break because I have him at the number 3 position right now.
I love it.
So we'll get to all of that and more after the break. We got to continue breaking down our top 5 NHL defensemen in fantasy hockey leagues this season. It is going to be a whirlwind when we get into fantasy hockey drafts this season. We couldn't be more excited to have everybody join us this year. So like I said, make sure you're DMing us and getting your information in there. But we'll come back after the break with more of our top 5 fantasy hockey defensemen.
Absolutely love it, Steele, and I love the Game Time app. Today's episode is sponsored by and brought to you by Game Time. Their new feature called Game Time Picks makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Comedy, theater, sports, whatever it is in your region, Game Time is the best ticket app, Steele, and I love using it for all of our local Ontario events. You know what it is. Make sure you are taking the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, though, please go enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. They are here to provide you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team across the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the podcast, Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. The team that we are talking about right now are the Nashville Predators, because Roman Josi comes in at number 3 for me. I know he's number 4 on your list. You've got 3 guys ahead of him. He is 3rd on my list. Again, one of those defensemen that I love watching play hockey. He's so good, and he's been doing it for such a long time in the NHL. He's going into his 14th season. He's only 34 years old right now. He's absolutely incredible. And like you said, the second best season of his career, played a full 82 games, 85 points, double digits once again in the goal column, which he's done pretty much every single year of his career besides 3. So 10 times he has been double digits in that goal category. Absolutely stellar player on the blue line, 45 penalty minutes, 151 blocks, 268 hits, and 46 blocks. So he's still filling out those peripheral categories. But when I view how I view this team right now is I was high on them last year. They're always one of those. The Nashville Predators to me have always been a dark horse team who can really give it to you when they want to. And again, dark horse team going into the postseason, who I thought they had a really good chance. Obviously, couldn't get by the Vancouver Canucks. Lost in the first round, but
Canucks are a good club.
They're a good club. They are a good club, and I understand why they weren't able to beat them. Some defensive problems in the crease. Again, good series overall, but let's get down to why I have him at number 3. You bring in Steven Stamkos. You bring in Jonathan Marchessault. It makes your top 6 group one of the most elite top 6s in the National Hockey League right now. So not even taking into consideration, they finished 10th in goals for last year with the team that they had. Obviously, a little bit of a over expectation of a season from Gustav Nyquist and Ryan O'Reilly, but I still expect them to be very good this season for Nashville. You bring in Brady Shea to help on the defensive end with Roman Josi as that top D pairing. You still have Luke Schenn, Alexander Carrier, and Jeremy Lauzon, who bring the boom, who are going to be able to box out their opponents in front of UC Saros, who I expect, again, UC Saros to have a major bounce back season, getting that monster contract. I love the shaping of this team right now. They're not a dark horse anymore. This is a dangerous Nashville Predators team. I think they're going to be even a top 5 team in goals for, with the lethal weapons they now have in the top 6 group. Maybe top 5 might be a little bit bold, but they're going to be top 10 again in goals for. They're going to be a really good power play team this upcoming season as well.
Okay.
They were, mediocre last year, 14.
They were bad.
15.
They were bad on the power play last year. They were 27th in the NHL. So that's a concern for me, is what I was just going to throw out there.
No, were they 27th? I don't think they were.
Oh, that's my bad, Steele. I'm actually looking at 2023.
Okay,
so
there we go. Yeah, they were 14th or 15th. They were mediocre. They were middle of the NHL. I expect them to be 16th, a lot better with Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. Again, a lot more weapons on that first power play unit. So for me, this is going to be a very dangerous team. I believe I had them finishing top 5 by the end of the season. I am really high on this Nashville team, and I'm also high on Roman Josi. That's why he comes in at number 3 for me, because he brings it every single game.
Norris Trophy winner,
Yeah.
Also, a second spot Norris vote getter 2 out of the last 3 years. And when you put up an 85-point season in your year 33 age in the NHL, now 34 years old, you got to really pay attention to a player like Roman Yosi, who has also just been very clutch for this team. 5 game-winning goals last year for Roman Yosi. Again, not a lot of leagues count game-winning goals, but when you got a D-man who's got a bullet like he does from the point and he can be there in the clutch to win for his team,
So
that's
good.
a little cherry on top. Let me get back to Rasmus Dahlin and the Buffalo Sabres, if you don't mind, because I got Dahlin at 3. And much like you love Roman Yosi, I'm starting to really love Rasmus Dahlin, and I think one of the real big plus sides of how good and young this Buffalo Sabres team, especially now on the blue line with Bo and Byram now there to support Owen Power and Dahlin, is this kid is going to be even more confident than ever, I think, Steele, to do his thing at the offensive end, because when he is confident and on his game, which I know last year, this Buffalo Sabres team, they had some ups and downs the year before, and that's why I was looking at 2023. They finished 3rd in the NHL in scoring. Last year, the power play struggled mightily. The offense struggled mightily. Buffalo finished Steele last year in goals, and this is correct. I'm just going to double check it before I embarrass myself once again. Buffalo was a 3rd spot in overall scoring a season before, and they finished 23rd in the league. A few goals behind the New York Islanders for total goals scored. So when you look at how much talent they have, and now what this bounce back you think is going to be, and I'll spit it out for Rasmus Dahlin, the categorical coverage, his banger league beauty in him, 66 penalty minutes, 154 hits, 154 blocks, 195 hits. There is so much to love, and I think he is just going to explode this year with the rest of the bounce back of this Buffalo Sabres team. I'm reading into that. That's why I have him slightly ahead of Yosi, but these are all the angles here that are playing into these values of these players even more.
Yeah.
Quinn Hughes, Vancouver Canucks, stud. Roman Yosi, Nashville Predators, stud. Both of those teams are going to be in the mix. Buffalo, dangerous young club on the come up. And then you have our next 2 players who are on 2 of the most offensively potent teams in the entire NHL. All of those angles mean cha-ching, and you got to get a piece of these guys.
Got to get a piece of these next 2 players 100%. If they fall into that right position of where you're drafting in your fantasy league, we're going to get to all of that and more next, coming up after the break, continuing the top 5 fantasy hockey defensemen from both Flip and I. Our list have been pretty much the exact same, besides in that part 1 episode where I had
Mackenzie Weegar madness. Yeah.
That Mackenzie, hey, it's not madness. I'm out here living. Hey. I'm out here living for those picks right now. And those are what help your team. So in my opinion, Mackenzie Weegar, number 7. Who did you have number 7 again? Let's get to that real quick.
This is just who knows who I had, Steele. I think I had Miro Heiskanen at 7.
I think you did. You definitely had Miro Heiskanen. He was an honorable mention for me.
That sounds right.
Mackenzie Weegar is number 7 for me. Heiskanen for you, number 7. But we'll get to our top 2 fantasy hockey defensemen after the break. But first, this episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to an Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, messaging, so you can connect with candidates faster. 93% of employers agree. Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip and I appreciate all that love and support you show us all summer long, all season long. And once again, thank you so much for helping us get to the top 10 in the nation, in Canada, for fantasy sports podcast. Couldn't do that without all of you out there tuning in every single day. So once again, we got to show love to our listeners and our listeners out there. So thank you so much for all of that. We appreciate it. Our top 2 defensemen, I think at this point, you know who the top 2 are. Over to you, my friend. Who do you have at number 2? Because I mean, I know who it is, but who do you have?
Come on. It's Evan Bouchard. And look, we've talked about the Edmonton Oilers at length for obvious reasons, because they went on such a magical run, and Evan Bouchard was right at the crux of it. And the playoffs are not something that count in fantasy, but one of the angles that you and I like to bring up that I think holds a whole lot of water entering this time of the fantasy draft season is how performances in the playoffs can sometimes inflate or overvalue certain pieces. That's not the case with Evan Bouchard. What you saw in the postseason from him, you know what I mean, though? Sometimes, you get special performances
100%.
from guys. They steal a series, perhaps. They score 1 or 2 big goals in a series, Arturi Lehkonen, and then he goes shooting up draft boards. Evan Bouchard deserves to be in the top 3 conversation as a fantasy beast on the blue line. And one of the things I also like to say on this show all the time, Steele, is just scratching the surface of his potential. That might hold true more so with this player than any other one on the blue line in terms of targets that you want. This fantasy season, the Edmonton Oilers, everyone's talked about their offseason. Adding Victor Arvidsson, adding Jeff Skinner to play alongside what looks like Leon Draisaitl on that second line could be
massive.
very, very hard for other teams to deal with when you have to throw absolutely everything in the kitchen sink at Connor McDavid's line. Draisaitl might feast this year. That's a whole other conversation for a whole other time. But that means Bouchard's 82 points. I know it's hard to expect more, but you can't help but feel he's not going to get any less than 80, 105 plus blocks, which is what he's done in a couple of seasons in a row here, nearly. I know last year, 77, whatever. He is amazing. He is sensational. I'll throw out some more adjectives if you'd like. 32 penalty minutes. I don't hate either. Steele, 220 shots. The Bouch bomb, he brings it. He's up there, and he is rising in the fantasy game, cementing himself as one of those players that I know you have been high on for a while, but now is kind of cemented as an absolute stud and a first-round pick in most formats.
I would be very surprised if Evan Bouchard has less than 80 points this next season. Again, there's a lot of reasons that we bring up the players that play alongside Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. When you look at the seasons that they've had recently, Leon Draisaitl, 3 consecutive 100-plus point season. Connor McDavid, 4 consecutive 100-plus point season, plus 100 assists this last season. Hey. These are some of the best players, if not the best 2 players in the National Hockey League right now. I'm also going to throw Nathan McKinnon in there because I can't forget about Nate Dogg, Mac Daddy, who gets it done on the offensive side of things. But these are viewed as some of the best players, if not the best. Obviously, Connor McDavid. So when you talk about a guy on the blue line who is now quarterbacking in the power play, who has taken the reins from Darnell Nurse, he went from 18 and a half minutes of average ice time 2 seasons ago to now 23 minutes this past season. I think he can get even higher than that, over 24 minutes of average ice time.
He's doing that in the postseason.
He was doing that in the postseason. And again, why I love this player, he's so durable. He's only missed 2 games in the last 3 seasons.
Great point.
He puts himself into very smart positions. He's not putting himself in dangerous positions where he's going to get laid out from behind or he's going to get caught with his head down. He's smart. He's got a wicked of a shot from the blue line when he's quarterbacking that top power play unit. Speaking of power play unit, top 5 in the NHL. They were also top 5 in goals for this last season. Evan Bouchard is on the come up. And after a career season, stepping out season from 40 points the year prior to 82, and then 32 points in the postseason this last
Something
year.
Like that.
32 points the postseason, 6 goals, 26 assists. I mean, he is right there behind Cale Makar, but there's a reason Cale Makar is number 1 in the National Hockey League right now, especially in fantasy hockey leagues. For me, I'm with you right there. Bouchard number 2, and you and I both have Cale Makar at number 1, like everybody else in fantasy hockey leagues.
Let's gush on Cale Makar in a second and just wrap up my point and our points on Evan Bouchard by saying, and check me if you think this is a bold statement, and I know you just mentioned the Edmonton Oilers had the 4th best power play in the NHL last year.
Yeah.
Rangers, Hurricanes, and Lightning. I think they can even be better on the power play.
100%.
And now they're going to have even more wrinkles to throw at the opposition. And like I said, matchup-wise, Chris Knobloch proved that he can really push the right buttons and get the most out of this lineup. And he is one of my favorite coaches, like new coaches. Obviously, we talk about the Brindamores, the Paul Maurices of the world. We like our boys that we like behind the bench. But he is really starting to impress me. And that tells me that the power play, the special teams, 2 things that turned around huge when he came in, give him a full off season, another more time with the boys under the belt. They are going to have a dangerously good year on the offensive end, much like the Colorado Avalanche, because let's just full pause stop. Cale Makar, I haven't seen many forwards skate like he can skate. We use edge work. We use terms like game-changing speed and pace. Watching this player play, Steele, there aren't as many exciting, the up-tempo that he plays with. And when he brings it end-to-end, it is Bobby Orr-esque. And I haven't watched, and I'm not going to sit there and say I was around watching Bobby Orr win cups. By the way, shout out to Perry Sound, a good Perry Sound boy in Bobby Orr. But that's the kind of player that this guy is. He's sensational, 90 points. 148 block shots, 37 hits, sky's the limit. And when you look at Bouchard, maybe the argument could be made that some of those peripherals aren't as there for Makar. I don't even care. To me, he clearly is the better D-man, and the sky's the limit. He is a 100-point kind of player on the blue line, and that doesn't come around very often, Steele. He's the number 1 fantasy blue liner, hands down, in my opinion.
Hands down, it's a consensus across the world, it seems like, that Cale Makar is the best. Look, he's the best defenseman that I've got to witness live. He is so good. And he's, again, I went to that Colorado Avalanche, Toronto Maple Leaf game, and just being able to watch them, their speed, their agility, their stick work. It's unbelievable. It's unmatched, honestly, when you get to watch them live. And Cale Makar is number 1, of course, for myself as well. 90-point season this last year. He hasn't hit 100 points, which, again, I can't remember the last time a defenseman hit 100 points in a season. We'll have to check that out.
We'll dig into that.
Cale Makar is right there. He's so close, and he missed 5 games.
Oh, Erik Karlsson did it a couple of years ago.
Yes, Erik Karlsson. That's who it was. I know it was recent. I just couldn't remember who it was, but again, this is a player that he's dealt with a few injuries throughout his career so far, but regardless, he's a point-per-game player, 90 points in 77 games last year. Again, like you said, maybe Evan Bouchard has a little bit of an upside in those other peripherals. I don't care either. Cale Makar, he has 100-point potential in his bag. 21 goals last year. He had 28 goals 3 seasons ago. He's one of those defensemen that he's a sniper. He can go end to end and go roof daddy, make you look silly, make your top defenseman be benched potentially. He's that type of caliber of player for me as well. Again, he's so smart with the puck. He's so smart in the defensive zone. He plays heavy minutes. This is 4 straight seasons of over 24 and a half minutes of average ice time. The thing that surprised me, though, I thought he was a lot bigger. He's only 5'11", 187 pounds. I thought he was like 6'1", 210. This guy,
his game is that big.
His game's that big. Look, he is a beast. He is dirty. Like, when you talk about guys that, like, when you hit him, he's not really moving that much. He is one tough cookie, if you will. So Cale Makar, number 1 on our list. He's number 1 pretty much across rankings across the world right now. So consensus-wise, number 1 player.
And look, if for some reason you're in a draft and Evan Bouchard got taken ahead of Cale Makar, would I be somewhat surprised? Yes. Would I think it's egregious? No, I wouldn't, because we're expecting everything we just said out of Bouchard and the Oilers and all of that. So I don't think it would actually be that much of a quote-unquote miss. I would just be somewhat surprised, given everything we just described. However, Evan Bouchard will be right there. Rasmus Dahlin, Roman Yosi, Quinn Hughes. You know what it is. If you missed the rest of the list, tap into it. Let me wrap this up with Makar, and I'm done. A Cup, a Calder, 4 All-Stars, a Norris, and a Conn Smythe. He just turned 25 years old last season. That right there, the kid's already basically a Hall of Famer. That's unreal stuff. We got more of that coming your way. We got winger breakdowns, centerman, and of course, bold predictions, rankings, and every bet that you need for the upcoming season.
And make sure you're staying tuned in for Friday's episode, where we will break down the entire format of our 2 listener leagues in Yahoo for fantasy hockey leagues. We'll break down all the categories. We'll break down the rules, expectations for this season, as well as entry fees for both leagues. So make sure you're staying tuned in for Friday's episode. And once again, if you want to be a part of it, you want to participate, make sure you get your name on the list. DM us on our Twitter account or our Instagram account, and we'll add you onto the list and finalize everything by September 20th so we can get prepared for the draft. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. To go enjoy Locked On NHL Podcast for your second listen of the day, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, from both Flip and I, we really do appreciate all the love we've been getting throughout this summer, getting us into the top 10 in the nation for fantasy sports podcasts. So thank you for that. Good luck with all your bets this weekend, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.